During the 2012 season, Dustin Penner, a member of the LA Kings, would have one of the most interesting seasons in his entire career. He already had Stanley Cup experience, winning with the Ducks in 2007, but that year, he would go on another run, helping his Kings win their first Stanley Cup in franchise history. But that's not all that happened to Penner that season, as before the grueling playoff run even began, Dustin Penner had another grueling incident of his own, as on January 25th, 2012, Penner would injure his back by famously eating pancakes, specifically his wife's pancakes. My only question, how did this even happen? Well, Penner himself would later recall the incident in an ESPN article later that year, where he stated, quote, "I woke up fine, sat down to eat, and my back locked up. It never happened to me before. I couldn't even stand up. Apparently, it's one of those mysterious things where you throw it out from sneezing. I just leaned over to dip into some delicious pancakes that my wife made." The joke would spread league-wide extremely fast, and Penner took it like a champ, later sponsoring an event called Pancakes with Penner, where he handed out pancakes at a local IHOP to help raise money for charity. If you thought that Penner's pancake fiasco was the strangest of them all, then you'd be wrong, as surprisingly, we're just getting started, as there have been a ton of strange injuries throughout NHL history that almost seem unbelievable, and I picked a handful of them that I found either the most comical or the strangest of them all. But before we begin, this video is sponsored by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is an app that allows users to purchase tickets to games, concerts, and live events. SeatGeek makes buying tickets simple, as they rate them on a scale from 1 to 10, with the higher number being the better of the deals. If you haven't already, make sure to use my promo code IDGT at checkout to save you $20 off your first purchase. Thanks so much for SeatGeek for sponsoring today's video. Now, let's get back into it. There are a few injuries that I wanted to dedicate an entire section to that I unfortunately couldn't, due to either lack of video evidence or very few sources to quote from. And while on the topic of food, in 2007, Canucks defenseman Brent Sopel would be forced to sit out of the Canucks playoff opener due to an injury he sustained picking up a cracker. Head coach Alain Vigneault described the incident as followed, stating, quote, "He picked up a cracker yesterday and his back blew out and just spasmed out. I swear, he was trying to pick up a cracker, and anyone who has back problems knows that this can happen. As a person who has back issues himself, as much as I do find this hilarious, I also know that this can very well happen at any given moment. There's been multiple times where I myself have bent, twisted, or turned the wrong way, causing my own back to spasm. So yeah, you can legitimately mess up your back by simply going down to pick up a cracker." Let's also give defenseman Brian Leach a mention, as you would think as a hockey player that you should be able to balance on ice even when you're not playing on it. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for Brian, as in 1993, while exiting a taxi, he would slip on the ice, breaking his ankle. Mike Fisher in 2013 would get violently attacked by a chipmunk in his home, causing him to injure his hand due to the chipmunk taking a bite. Apparently, Fisher's wife, Carrie Underwood, recorded a video of the incident taking place, but due to it being posted on Vine and the platform shutting down, it's unable to be archived, thus preventing this incident from getting its own section. And finally, former Blues winger Mark Reeds would suffer from second and third degree burns while making popcorn. In 1987, after heating some oil in a pan, he removed the lid only to have the oil burst into flames. The New York Times would report that Reeds would be out day to day due to the incident. 2008 seemed to be a cursed year when it came to injuries, and 3 players in particular suffered from some of the strangest injuries of all time. First, Blues defenseman Eric Johnson would tear ligaments in his right knee when his foot would get trapped between the brake and the accelerator of a golf cart. Claude Giroux would later also injure himself playing golf, but that was during 2013. Perhaps an infamous injury would occur to Avs legend Joe Sakic during 2008 as well. At the time, he was already recovering from a herniated disc in his back, where he would then break 3 fingers and damage a tendon while operating a snowblower. This obviously messed up his hand and caused him to officially miss the remainder of the season, requiring surgery on his left hand. But the craziest and most absurd injury from 2008 definitely has to send us to St. Louis yet again, as the Blues would host the LA Kings and would have Republican vice presidential nominee Sarah Palin drop the puck.
And Kachuk will do the honors for the Blues against the Kings captain Dustin Brown.
Well, apparently, Blues goaltender Manny Legace would slip and fall on the carpet laid out for her, hurting his hip on impact. What's even crazier is that Legace would still suit up for the game, but would have to leave after the first period due to the injury acting up. There's so many more strange injury stories that I'd like to briefly touch up on before we end today's video. First, you have to mention Wade Beelock's injury in 2006, where after being bit by a spider, instead of gaining superpowers, he got a bump so big on his ankle that it caused it to swell to the point where he couldn't get a skate on. Ron Tugnut pulled his groin while tying a shoe, and Sharks Darren Turcotte would puncture his eardrum with a cotton swab before the game. Funny enough, a similar injury would also happen to another Shark in 1991, where Rick Lessard would miss 6 weeks due to a vicious Q-tip attack. But I want to end off today's video by talking about one of the most unique goaltenders of all time, that being, ironically, former Sharks netminder Artis Irby, who was quoted saying that he got bit by Rambo, causing him to break a finger and suffer from nerve damage on his left hand. And, well, the actual Rambo didn't bite Irby's hand. It was instead his Labrador Newfoundland mix dog, who happened to be named Rambo. Hockey players are some of the toughest players in any professional sport, but even they too can suffer from some of the strangest injuries that force them to miss significant time. So when eating pancakes tomorrow or bending over to pick up something you dropped, just remember that if it can happen to a professional NHLer, then it can truly happen to anyone.